Hello and welcome to the Before and After podcast, the podcast for the short-term accountant and those who want to know what they can do with their accounting degree. I am your co-host, Keegan.
And I am your co-host and producer, Darlene Nationale.
We are two former public accountants with a wide range of experience in tax, audit, advisory, big firms, small firms, medium firms. We'll be bringing in some people that we've met through our career journeys to tell you their stories as well.
And how they were able to navigate both in or out of public accounting. We're here to knock down those professional barriers so we can unveil the different career journeys through firms like Big Four and the possibilities after.
Hello, and welcome back once again to another episode of your favorite podcast you've ever listened to, the Before and After podcast. I am Keegan, CPA, and with me, a special guest. We have Laura Watson, CPA, formerly a public accountant, and who has now moved on to, well, you'll hear the details in a little bit, but you've done a lot of different things, Laura. So how are you doing?
I'm good. I am just enjoying my Saturday, hoping Sunday. It is Sunday, not Saturday. After getting out of the 9 to 5, I kind of lose track of what day it is, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. So.
I completely understand that.
Like, what day is it? So yeah, I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me.
And it's going to be a wonderful next 45 minutes or so of podcasting for both of us on a beautiful Sunday just afternoon for me. I'm not sure, you're in West Coast time zones, right?
I am.
Okay.
I live on a small island up in the Pacific Northwest. So
whenever people mention islands, you always think tropical, like Hawaii or Fiji, but we always forget that there's islands in colder places too.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, not much snow here, but it definitely gets a little chilly. So we got ocean, but the beaches, you don't want to go in them most of the year.
Yeah, they're not sunbathing beaches.
No.
So anyway, let's dive right into your career journey. I guess you can start with either what you did in college, or we can just jump straight into the public accounting, whichever you choose.
Yeah, I think I'm going to start. So I had decided about my junior year, like a lot of people, to go into accounting, mostly because I was good at it. You like go into your first accounting course and you're like, oh, that actually made sense to me. And it doesn't make sense for a lot of people around me. So maybe there's something to this, right? And my family's pretty entrepreneurial. And so I talked to my parents and they were like, that's great. The parents' dream, right? Accountant, lawyer, doctor, sending you to 4-year college. I hope there's something there, right? And I ended up taking a semester and going abroad to Spain. And while there, I didn't have to take any accounting courses, right? And I came back and I wanted nothing to do with accounting. And this would have been I went my junior year, so this was my senior year. Recruiting is really heavy. And I came back and I was like, what the heck is all this recruiting stuff? Like, this is like totally foreign to me. And maybe I'll get into that when I talk about what I do now. And so anyway, I totally missed the boat. I applied at a couple places thinking, well, my grades are good. I went abroad. I held good jobs and leadership and no one wanted me, right? And so I got denied by all these places and I was like, what is going on? And I actually made it, oddly enough, through to second rounds at EY, and one of the partners asked me how I got there.
Oh man.
Yeah, so, which was interesting.
Was this in a major city? I
went to Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I mean, they get heavily recruited by Big Four, Moss Adams.
Okay, so it's not like you're in. I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway.
So we were heavily recruited by them, and we had I think it was called BAP or something. Is that what it's called? Or something along the lines of like the accounting programs, kind of fraternity type thing that I was never a part of. I never did any of the like schmoozy kind of stuff. Like I did not understand it. I did not understand the red carpet. It felt icky to me. And
so something along, your attitude towards it, or this like weird feeling you had towards accounting and accounting recruiting, it didn't click, and you didn't like play the game, I guess is what it sounds like.
No, I did not want to play the game. And I had others around me where I felt very pressured to play the game, right? Like, why would I waste this opportunity? And the problem was that there was no structure around hearing about anything else. I mean, I always talk about if I was to go back again, I would have known that I could have gotten an EA and I could have, learned more about taxes, which I think are, after going and starting my own firm, understanding taxes is a really big deal, right? From audit to tax. And so just stuff like that, where I was just never told any of those things. And it was always big four, big four, big four. And so in my kind of like anti-ness of the establishment, I guess, I started doing some networking on my own. And one of my best friends had a second house on another island in the Pacific Northwest, and they were neighbors with a partner of Moss Adams. And are you familiar with Moss?
I am familiar with Moss Adams.
Yeah. And so anyway, he was like, yeah, let me know if you want his email and you guys can chat. Right. And so I said, yeah. And that felt better to me, like better for my energy and everything. And I had been denied by Moss Adams in my initial recruiting process. And so I set up a meeting with him. And then I went to another recruiting event that Gonzaga held in Seattle. And we were going to like Starbucks, and people were going to Amazon, I think, and these different kind of, they call it like a trek.
Okay.
And PwC was there. And I started chatting with them, and they were like, oh, you're not recruited yet? And I was like, no. And so anyway, I basically sent them my resume, had one phone interview with them, and they were like that day. And they were like, you got the job. And I was like, seriously? Like that's it? And it still didn't feel good to me. And I was like, okay, well, I have some other people that I'm speaking with, so I'll let you know. And I kind of just left them hanging out there, And they let me. They were like, yeah, we'll give you a month to decide. And so I ended up that night also sitting next to another Moss Adams partner from the same exact office location, another tax partner, who was a Gonzaga alumni. And I kind of told him about my experience. And he said, well, you come see me. And I said, well, I'm already going to your office tomorrow to meet this other partner. So I ended up talking to both of them. And through the tax partners, they made space for me to come into Moss Adams, into the audit tract. And that's how I kind of caught up and did it on my own. It was incredible, actually, to meet them. And it was totally what I needed.
It's really amazing to hear that, you skipped over the traditional, I guess, college recruiting process that some of these firms use. And you just went straight for the human connection, the tried and true, talking to somebody and saying, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. Would you want to work with me? And it worked. It sounds like it worked for both firms, for Moss Adams and PwC.
Yep, it did. And I knew the second I stepped into Moss Adams in that office, I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. And part of that gets into where I'm at now. Like, I'm highly intuitive, and I just knew that this is the spot, and it's the correct choice for me to be here right now. Even though I got back from being abroad and was like, I don't know about this accounting thing, but ultimately I knew it was a bridge to get to where I was supposed to be, and Moss Adams was the firm that I was supposed to be at. Okay.
And so how did your time at Moss Adams go?
It was pretty good. I would say top of my, I don't know if they call it class, or I don't even remember. I had really good jobs. I had some really cool clients. I had some really great partners, some not so great that I worked with, and senior managers. And I think a lot of folks say, when I hear them talk about their experiences, they really enjoy the people for the most part. And there's still people that I keep in contact with. I completely take ownership in my inability to manage my own energy and to know what was mine in public accounting and like in the audit room versus someone else's. What was someone else's anger? What was someone else's frustration and stress versus my own? And so that really played a big role in me burning out from there.
Okay. And how long were you there for?
I was there for 2 years. So
Okay.
I made it to senior, and I had kind of decided that I had come up to the island I now live on for a job, an audit job. And I came here, and it's coincidentally where my parents also honeymooned in their VW van back in the 80s, just randomly. And I loved it here. And I thought, I'm either going to live on that island or I am moving to Europe. Those are my two options. Like when I decided I was done with public accounting, but I had to be patient because I didn't have any options. I like applied to Airbnb and these things. And then this client that was here, I really hit it off with them, and I got to do lots of construction accounting type stuff. And, as an auditor coming into a client's space, I mean, to hit it off with your clients as far as still having the scrutiny that you need, but also not making them feel like shit it's a good balance, right?
Yeah. Very delicate balance too.
Yes, it is a delicate balance. And so I got a call from them, audit had issued several months later, and I got a call from them. I was sitting in a bar in SeaTac Airport waiting to go visit my parents. And I was like, this is weird. I don't know this number. And I actually answered it, and they were like, hey, we're all sitting at a conference table and we want to hire you to come work for their subsidiary that they had just started. And it was an internet company. Mm-hmm. So that's how my transition went. And it was a very easy choice for me. I was like, well, I had already decided I was moving there.
What is it that you're doing with all these people that you meet that they just instantly want to hire you?
I don't know. I think there's just that human connection, and it's we're supposed to meet. That's the only, it's completely, I just believe in that kind of stuff. It's completely not a coincidence that they come into my life, and there's been so many things now where this is where I have my life. I met my husband here, all that stuff where it's like just guiding you, right? And so even through all the bullshit of public accounting and all of the overworked and everything, it still was a great decision for me. Like I had a lot of bitterness for a long time about my experience there. And I really feel that ultimately, like I said, it was my own mismanagement of my own energy. It just wasn't the correct place for me. I was able to learn things that I needed to learn, but it was not a long-term viable solution like it isn't for many people.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that a lot of people need to hear, is that it's not a long-term option for everybody, right? There's some people that they'll stick it out, they'll make it to partner, they'll have a great career. But for a lot of us, it's just, get in, learn what you can, and then move on to what you're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. And it's the what you're supposed to be doing is what people get hung up on.
Yeah. And that's, that's part of the career. People
are going to hear that and be like, what the heck?
That's something that I know a lot of people have gone through that. Sometimes I feel that way myself. Although I am quite comfortable with where I am now. But I mean, for a few months leading to the end of my public accounting career, I was like, what am I doing here? This is not for me, but where do I go next? So what were you doing at that at the job on the island, that they offered you the job at at their sub, and they said, we want you to work for us. What did you end up doing there?
I started kind of in a senior accountant bookkeeper role, which was really interesting. So, and they just said, you're going to move up and this company is growing. And all I knew was that I wanted to be here, and they paid me more than what I was being paid in public. And I was like, okay, I get to live on an island, and I moved here all by myself, and, no family, didn't know a soul. And so I moved here, was a senior accountant for a few months, and the CFO ended up leaving. It didn't work out. And so the guy above me, he got promoted to CFO. And so then I was basically controller. They named me like director of finance. So I was taking calls from customers complaining about their internet bill. I mean, the amount of stuff that I've listened to from internet customers is beyond. As well as managed construction projects. So we've been putting in fiber optics all over the islands. And so there's lots of islands here, but there's some major ones, and they put in basically fiber infrastructure, which has completely changed the islands as far as you have all the Microsoft, the Amazons, the really, the Gates, all of them coming up here, right? And working and living, especially during the pandemic. So this internet thing has totally changed the game up here. And I was part of the initial team that helped grow the company to a point where now it's pretty stable, and project accounting and hiring employees and workflows and all sorts of stuff. I was HR and payroll, and I learned a ton, right? And not enough to go like back into like, say, a Fortune 500 company or something, which I would never be caught doing in my life. But it was a great experience that still continued to burn me out because I still had no idea how to manage my energy.
So you're what, about 3.5 years out of college, maybe a little bit right around there, right? And you're basically the controller or director of finance for a company, and just by happenstance, just by somebody leaving.
Yep, just by someone leaving, and they just knew that I was the person to take that position, and they put a ton of faith in me, and I proved myself time and time again in that company. There was never a question whether I was able to do the job. And we even migrated from QuickBooks Desktop to Xero, and then Xero to Sage and Tax. So I also did a ton of software migrations in the process too. So there was a lot going on.
Was there ever a time when you sort of like, I don't know, you had the imposter syndrome of like, I'm not sure I'm supposed to be here, or were you sure of yourself the whole time?
There was a few times. I mean, I'm there with a whole bunch of guys.
Okay.
Most of them treated me, like gold basically, but a couple of them definitely, like if I spoke up about something, they'd be like, you better watch your mouth, which is the same thing that I had in public as well. And I always had kind of an older female kind of watching out for me, and was like, well, I need an example, that happened in public. And so at this point I was kind of on my own, just kind of forging my own path. I mean, when you walk in too, and you're presenting at board meetings with these older board members that are, don't have faith in the company working out. They have been working at these Fortune 500 companies and are now retired. So they're used to that kind of role. And you're there presenting to them your next year's forecast and budget, which is, out of this world. Sometimes you're like, I don't know, can we do this? Right. It was during those moments, for sure, it was daunting. But I think the most imposter syndrome I felt was wondering how I can do something different when I knew that accounting wasn't what I wanted to do.
And it's so interesting because obviously you had the talent, you had the knowledge, you had the drive to
Mhm.
do all these things. It doesn't sound like you ever, struggled with the debits and credits or the financial reporting or with
No.
the corporate world on, I guess, on a technical level, but there's just something missing.
Yeah, I just knew. Yeah, I never struggled with that, and that has been a big blessing. And I honestly was more scared. I think you're protected a little bit when you're in public and in
Hmm.
private. Is there someone that's kind of ahead of you that can watch over your work, or you can ask questions to? Um, and when I went out on my own, when I didn't know, for example, about much about taxes or like even calling the IRS because I never had to do that, that's where the imposter syndrome kicked in. Was like, I don't actually know some of the simplest stuff that is required for a small business to run, right? That most of the people that actually need really good accountants right now need them to know about. And
Hmm.
that's where it was some of those semantics where I kind of got in my head a little too much, and I had to get over that.
Hmm. And so, how were you able to navigate? Because it sounds like you were in sort of a tough position, right? Just kind of you're
Mm-hmm.
thrown into this, you're promoted, you're in charge of
Mm-hmm.
basically everything. It sounds like. And so, Do you feel like you're successful in that position, or what was sort of the reason for you moving on from that position too?
I was working. It was simply working way more than, I mean, I was working sometimes 80-hour weeks,
Yeah.
way more than I was in public. And I didn't have the team to help me. I couldn't delegate anything. It was a small startup, so trying to trying to get them to even hire someone in the accounting department was like, why would we do that?
Yeah.
Um, and so it was purely the amount of work that was there. And that's where it just didn't work anymore. And I had become so burnt out, and it
Hmm.
become so clear to me that my body was shutting down working there and working that much, that I didn't know what I was going to go do. And I was terrified to start my own firm, but I knew that like this was not it. Right.
Hmm.
It was clear.
So, did you feel like a constant stress, or was it just the sheer amount of work was just too much?
Um, there was constant stress. I mean, you have people messaging at all hours pretty much on, we had Slack, I think, for the most part. And so you have that, you have, when you're managing so many pieces and trying to put them together, it's, dreaming about how does this system work with this system in your sleep. And I've got this deadline, and oh, now we have the audit coming, and then we have a board meeting,
Hmm.
and all of these things. And so it was that constant. What I now can see is I had no time to actually do anything that I enjoyed, that I not even enjoyed. Like I couldn't even read a news article or any type of book because I was so consumed by what was going on at work all the time.
Hmm.
And that's when I knew that it had to change, but several it took several things for me to actually get there. And it was between having panic attacks, crying on the floor in my kitchen, and my now husband being like, hey, like, you can't do this. We can't do this. We can't stay together if you do this. Um, to, well, to allow myself to keep being subjected to it is what
Hmm.
the issue was. Right. And um, I ended
Yeah.
up going, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say a lot of people who are in these sort of, in the stressful situations with their careers, and they feel stuck. Like I felt it myself, and sometimes it takes for me it was my girlfriend, right? For other people,
Mm-hmm.
it's their spouse or whoever, just somebody that can be like a voice of reason, somebody who says, "Hey, this is not normal. This is not something you
Mm-hmm.
should be doing." And
Mm-hmm.
for me, I snapped out of it and I said, "You know what? You're right." So was it the same for you?
Yes. And it started with podcasts, actually, I think was the first time. And there weren't many accounting podcasts out. Now there's a lot more. But I just started listening to some people who had started their own firm, and they kind of had similar stories. They don't go as in depth as you guys do on the before and after, but they kind of allude to like, yeah, it didn't work for me. It wasn't right. It wasn't this, that, or the other thing. And I was like, oh, I'm not crazy, right? I think a lot of times we feel that we're the only ones going through this and we don't know why. And we don't know what to do next either.
Mm-hmm. And so what did you do next?
So I went back and forth and I kept saying, I'm going to start my own thing. I like dabbled in it a little bit. And then February of 2020, he was my boyfriend at the time. We went to Tanzania, and I decided to go during the busiest time of the year. I said, I have an opportunity to go to Tanzania on safari, and I'm going. So this is right before the pandemic hit, like weeks before. And we went there. We ended up eloping. We had a whole surprise wedding, which is a whole other story. And we got back. The trip was incredible. And we got back and everything shut down. And I was in the deepest, darkest hole I had ever been in. I had just been in this place like full of joy and like the most exuberant kind of life-giving energy that I'd ever been in. And then I came back and I was just like this, there's a pandemic right now and I can't even care because I'm so in this dark place. And something has to change. And so I went back and forth with my mind a little bit, like, you can't quit your job now. Like the world is on fire, basically. It feels like no one knew what was going on. And ultimately one day I got pissed off at something that got put on my desk that I had repeatedly said no to and was putting up boundaries on. And I walked into my boss's office with a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses and I quit.
So how did that conversation go? Did you walked in, you slammed the bottle on the table, you said, yeah, I'm having a drink because I'm out of here.
Yep. And so we both had a drink. And this was right when everyone was leaving the office and everyone was going to work from home. And I came in and we're just like, you know what? I just had this life-changing experience and I can't get over this. I've been thinking about this for years. I'm burnt out. I've told you a million times and I needed help and no one, you couldn't give it to me. And besides that, I'm just over it. I'm over it. Like I have to believe that there's something else out there for me or else I'm screwed, right? I have nothing left. And we're actually very good friends. And so we had a really long talk about it. And he asked, is there any other position I can put you in? Can I make you a director of operations? Can I do anything? And I was like, no, I'm done. It's my time. And I ended up staying on working there for another 6 to 8 months during the transition. And they knew that I was starting my own firm and I worked kind of part-time and they were really gracious about it. And they threw me a going away party at a winery and it was beautiful. And I'm still friends with lots of those people today, but I can't imagine ever stepping foot in there again in the same capacity.
Mm-hmm. And so what sort of firm were you running by yourself?
Just an accounting firm with like CFO services and bookkeeping and kind of just your basic for small businesses, which would do incredibly well on this island because there's hardly any of that kind of help or expertise here. And so they actually have to go off island for it or have it very segregated. And so I started with that and I started helping a few local businesses and I still felt like in my body something wasn't right.
And so how long were you doing the accounting services?
I was doing those even when I was still at my previous job. So
Okay.
I probably did those for about 8 to 12 months, like where I was trying to market those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I was doing that, I was actually gaining a lot more followers who were other accountants. And I found myself speaking to other accountants a lot more rather than my client, who would have been my ideal clients, right? Small businesses, and guiding. And I started having a lot of them ask me like, well, where did you learn this stuff? Or, you know, how did this come up for you? And how do you get past similar questions you're asking me now? Imposter syndrome and talking with clients and getting clients and all of these things. And so I started speaking to that a little more. And I was actually working with Lindsay Hansen, who I know has been on your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
She was my coach at the time, who was a really pivotal person in getting me to move and quit the, no, she didn't, wasn't, I don't know if she was there when I quit the job, but soon after, right? Where it was kind of the aftermath of my mind going like, holy shit, Laura, what did you just do? She was a really, really great person for that. She's a great catalyst between leaving your job. I mean, that's what our whole podcast is about, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and that next step, she's a great bridge for that. And so with that, then I started dabbling in coaching a little bit. And that's kind of where my whole like spiritual journey, guidance, you know, life and business strategy thing kind of came into play.
Mm-hmm. And so you kind of you jump out of the accounting world and you jump into the world of human design.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so this is the part where you know, I'm way less familiar with human design than I am with accounting. So I'm here to learn. So what was the moment that you realized that, you know, maybe I should be speaking more and more about the spiritual side, the human design of people, and regarding myself and regarding others who are asking all these questions? What made you make the switch?
I think I still wanted to know why I felt a certain way.
Okay.
There wasn't an acceptance within me to just say, okay, I'm feeling all these emotions. I'm feeling resentment towards certain aspects of my job. I'm feeling so much fear. And, you know, there's so many tools out there for mindset and spirituality and to understand those things, but they felt sometimes very airy-fairy to me.
Mm-hmm.
And just like a lot of people that you probably are like this, your listeners are, we are skeptical and more logical. And so truly I was kind of at this point where I knew I didn't want to do accounting anymore. And I still was dabbling in it a little bit, but I was like teetering between like coaching and accounting. What do I want to do? Do I want to totally leave this industry? Right. And so I ended up one morning, I kind of like a voice in my head, like, you need to look up your human design. I kind of knew about my astrology, but I just said, okay, I've seen it around a little bit with different coaches or people that I had followed maybe on Instagram. And so I looked it up, and my design in particular, I'm what's called a mental projector. So there's different energy types with human design. And with human design, it is the science of differentiation is what it is. So it's helping, basically, it's a tool for you to understand who you are, and most importantly, what's not you, and what you've been conditioned your whole life to believe about yourself that's probably not true. And it guides you into this kind of unique strategy for you to live your life. So when we were talking earlier about the how, or what's next, or how do I know what's next, human design gives you a unique blueprint for you to make decisions, right? So for me, it's not correct for me to make decisions in a spur of the moment thing. And so that, even just reading that, I was like, whoa, okay. And I went down this whole rabbit hole, learning about it. And you can Google it. You can look up your chart. You'll need your birth date, your birth time, the city you were born in, and it'll pull it up for you. And you can find basic information online about your energy type. So some of us are like, I'm a projector, so I don't have consistent energy. So when I was burning out all the time and exhausted and crying and wondering, how can my peers at Moss Adams stay up till 2 a.m. and get up at 6 a.m. and keep going all the time, which I don't think is healthy for any type, but like, why can they do it better than me, right? Mm-hmm. Those kind of questions of, they get answered in this system. And so ultimately, now I have switched to readings, and I do readings for lots of people in finance and accounting in particular regarding this. And it's been such an aha for so many of them. A lot of them are public accountants or have left public accounting and are very much in this, who am I? I know this isn't correct for me, but what is? How do I know? What's my path? Why do I feel so emotional and everyone's shaming me for it? Those kind of things.
So it's sort of a system of introspection and looking at yourself and understanding who you are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you start talking about, especially like, so there's different centers in the body, and one of them is an emotional center. And so a lot of times if you have it, what's called defined, is that you are kind of on an emotional wave all the time. And so you have highs and lows, and you don't make decisions when you're on a high or you're on a low. You wait till when you feel neutral, versus mine is undefined. And so I'm picking up the emotions of everyone else. So when I'm crying in the bathroom at a client and I'm wondering why the hell I keep crying all the time, I think back about it. I'm like, oh, I think a lot of people were really emotional in that room, right? They were like I was deeply picking up what they had. And then I was trying to figure out what to do with it, because I wasn't really mad about anything, right? Mm-hmm. There's just several aspects where it can be so affirming to your experience as a human right now, and how much understanding we can have about other people and what they put on us and what society has tried to homogenize us as. And that's my big beef with public accounting, is how much they try to homogenize people and the corporate world in general, right? Mm-hmm. And human design is completely anti-homogenization.
Do you find that a lot of the people that you help coach, do they feel that same way, where they feel like they're being forced to act in a certain way to be homogenized with their other people in finance?
Mm-hmm. Yes, those are the people that I attract, are the people that have been struggling with this for a long time, whether they're starting their own firm or are scared to, or not knowing what the next step is. And they see all of their peers doing one thing and their body's telling them to do something different. And their mind is like, no, you're supposed to go with these people. You're supposed to go with the crowd, right? It's really scary to step out of the box and say, no, I'm going to do this differently, but I have plenty of examples of doing it differently my entire life. So, it's kind of like an I go first thing.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that a lot of your clients and your coachees, do any of them make these sort of major like 180 transitions like you did? Because obviously accounting is a very numbers based, sit down and work and stare at a computer and think about debits and credits all day, versus this is much more introspective to yourself and focusing on yourself and your relation to the world around you. So are there other people who are, that they talk with you and then they say, you know what, I'm getting out of finance and I'm going to go do something completely opposite?
I had one message from a former client who messaged me the other day and said, I have something to tell you. It's really good news. I've been diving into all this stuff for astrology and human design, and I'm going to make a huge change in my business. And her business was a tax practice, really successful. And I haven't yet been able to talk to her, but I have a feeling that she is one of those 180ers, or at least aspects. I think, to do what I did takes a lot of trust and deep surrender in the whole process. And I have a huge support system in that, and my husband to do that. And so that's been a blessing. And I think there's a lot of things that needed to happen for me to, even leave a 6-figure salary, right? To say, okay, it doesn't matter to me right now. And so I wouldn't say 180s, but I would say that, I've had clients that were partners at a firm that have left the firm. She left before we started working together, but I started working with her soon after she left. So it was more, she made the decision and did the thing, and then she needed help kind of guiding her into her next steps in her own business, right? And so we continue to work on and off for, it's been about a year now. Making those, we always want to think that these steps are really large and that they need to be made large and grandiose. And I think there's something to be said for the small changes that we make, because these are not just changes for their business. It's a whole trajectory of their life. And it's very it's gradual, and it's not just for them, it's for their children, and it's for their partners, and it's for anyone that's going to be watching them that they don't even know that's watching them, saying, oh shit, she did it, I can do it too,
And so it's, finding the life that works for them, and creating a positive impact on everybody else around them as well.
Yeah, we're all here to give our gifts to the world, and a lot of us just don't know what those are, and we haven't been able to have the time, place, space, people to show us those things. And I think that's the gift that I've given myself, is the time and space to see what it is I'm here to do.
And so with that, Laura, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and explaining exactly what it is, those gifts that you have to give. If people want to reach out to you and maybe have a conversation, maybe send a message, where can they do that?
Probably the best place is my Instagram. It's at Laura Torma, TORMA _, and I'll send that to you as well, so you have that. But that's my married name, which I switched my Instagram to. So I'm still dabbling in that like married life name change situation.
Yeah. I don't understand, but I haven't had to do it myself. But
in the butt during COVID, or I've just said I'm just going to leave that one on the back burner.
So Laura, thank you so much for coming on to the show, and we hope to hear about your experiences and what you're doing next very soon.
Thank you.
If you liked this podcast, make sure to share it with coworkers, families, and friends. Feel free to connect and message us on all our social media platforms at B4 and After Pod. That's the letter B, the number 4, and After Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Are you interested in sharing your story? Fill out our Google introduction form that's linked in our social media bios. If you haven't already, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts so we can continue to provide you with unique stories from all around the world. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Before and After. Until the next one, bye.